Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs.
Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished members of the panel, welcome to the Galien Forum for Africa. I'm indeed pleased to spend the next few minutes. I'm SARAKA-YAO, Director General at the Alliance Gavi, in charge of mobilization of funding and resources to fight against the different infectious diseases. And today, I have a very distinguished panel to work with. And within the framework of the fight against the pandemic, the idea today is to see how we can discuss these very important themes with you, the tools to fight against the pandemic. And the very first panel will focus on the production of vaccines as one of the key tools in the fight against the different infectious diseases, and especially today with the announcement of an imminent vaccine which may be put at the disposal of the continent. And I think this is a current event. The Alliance Gavi, with its partners, the WHO, CEPI, UNICEF, and many other partners, during this period of the pandemic, came up with a unique solution, a global solution, the COVAX solution, to enable, to put at the disposal of countries the necessary tools, especially the continent Africa, to fight against the pandemic and to ensure that these tools are available on the continent and the rest of the world. This finding was made based on the lessons drawn from earlier pandemics, for instance, the H1N1. Today, therefore, we are very happy because we've been able to set up this COVAX facility, which brings together 189 countries. And thanks to this facility, the idea is to invest in a portfolio of vaccines, which will increase the possibility of success and putting the vaccine at the disposal of countries in Africa and the rest of the world. The fact that we have very many countries will make it possible to have a greater power of negotiation and to send these vaccines to the people at a lower cost. So I'm indeed pleased in terms of, I'm pleased to introduce the members of this panel for this sub-theme, Mr. Richard HATCHETT, who is the Director General of CEPI, which is the coalition which fights against epidemics and has key partners such as COVAX. And there is Professor Papa Salif who is a specialist in infectious diseases and infectious and tropical diseases. Today, he will be able to take the floor and talk to us about their own experience. So without any further ado, I would like to ask the first question to the members of our panel. First, to Professor Papa Salif. And the question is as follows. The search for a vaccine for AIDS, Ebola, malaria has not yet been achieved. So why is there this struggle to get a vaccine for this pandemic? And what are the achievements so far? Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Let me start by thanking the organizers of this third forum 2020. Let me thank the Minister of State and Professor Amadou and the co-organizing committee, Ibrahim Masek and Madam Sedebuba, as well as all the members of the team. This pandemic, of course, is one of a kind. This morning, the WHO said we have 65,500,000 cases and more than 1 million dead. So this vaccine will make it possible to control the epidemic and to be able to come back with a normal social life and to develop our economies. The objective is to vaccinate over 60 to 80% for each country and we could acquire global immunity. Madam, I'm going to discuss 3 issues during this few minutes. First, why research? And why did research make it possible for us to have in less than a year a vaccine? Secondly, international solidarity in support of geographical and financial support. And very quickly, thirdly, I'll suggest what could be done at the domestic level. The very first issue is why is that in history, in the first time in the history of modern medicine, for the first time, we have been able to develop a medicine, whereas traditionally we have to wait for 10 to 15 years. It should be noted that it was 2 months after the declaration of the virus that different teams went into action. And today, there are 230 candidate vaccines which have been assessed. 45 are in phase 1, 17 in phase 2, 13 in phase 3, and 2 which have been authorized to be rolled out. So we know very well that there's Pfizer, Biotech, there's AstraZeneca, and they have shown that there's efficiency in this vaccine, and there's reason for hope. Now, so why in less than a year was this vaccine rolled out? Now, these are experiences which have been achieved in the past years in the scientific era, in the past epidemics. For instance, during the H1N1, for Ebola, there's a vaccine, and then SARS. So these past epidemics made it possible, and they prepared the ground. There were platforms which were ready for application in the case of any new pandemic emerging, and then COVID came. So there's also the use of new technologies applicable to biology. There's nanotechnology, there's biochemistry, there's bioinformatics, and all these new technologies are indeed factors which facilitated the development of this vaccine. And I would always say that there was no hurry in the production of this vaccine. It was just produced fast. But another issue was scientific collaboration at a global scale. With the publication of data, there is transparency, and the context, the epidemiological context too, because to carry out trials, there must be participants. So the epidemiological context made it possible for these different trials to be conducted and to have results. Now, the other, I said 3. The very first is the scientific development. The second is the new logistic approach. Now, with the construction of production units well before obtaining the results of these trials, this was a risk, as a matter of fact, because traditionally we wait for the end of phase 3 before we start fabricating the units. So it was a normal, it was a new approach this time. Now, coming to logistics, it is logistics and administration, be it in North America or be it in Europe or anywhere. States gave logistic and administrative support to facilitate the development of this vaccine at the pharmaceutical level. But I think the last explanation is the fact that there was massive investment, public-private funding. We have never seen this in the development of a vaccine, where governments, private foundations, pharmaceutical firms, important personalities, all together came with an unprecedented investment. And this made it possible, of course, to develop this vaccine very quickly. The next element to explain this is that we have the vaccine. So what should we do? And there's need for solidarity, and my colleague will be talking about that very soon. We'll see what the developed countries have done, and we said that COVAX will enable countries with less resources to have access to this vaccine. So COVAX is going to give us these vaccines in less developed countries, but it's important for our countries to be ready before the vaccine comes. So there's a need to set up a national vaccination plan on the COVID vaccine in all countries. And this is a time to do so. And they can see the different elements. There's a priority population in every country. They should be identified, they should be numbered, and then there's the necessary logistics to move from one part of the country to another because everyone has to be vaccinated. Everything should be done to ensure that this vaccine is at the doorsteps, at the access of those in the countryside. It should be accessible geographically and financially. So there's a material and financial aspect. There's the need for a budget. Even if COVAX gives us these vaccines at a national level, the logistics will need financial support. We should identify the potential sites for this vaccination at the regional, central, the divisional, rural areas, and even at the capital. But Madam, I would like to insist on the importance of a communication strategy. Right from now, before the arrival of the vaccine, they should start communicating with the people and telling them why it is important to take the vaccine. And we should be able to explain and convince the people to ensure that the people will accept the vaccine. There's the need for health education through a communal approach, as we did with other illnesses. We should involve opinion leaders, scientists, religious leaders, and together we will be able to give the appropriate communication and ensure that it will be translated in different languages. And lastly, food for thought, to end my 5 minutes, in the Ministry of Health, we should involve other health sectors, enterprise medicine, university medicines, the army, and all the different groups which may be able to contribute to the logistics. And we should also involve the private medicine. So, Madam Chair, we should act quickly, and the time is now for us to be transparent before the arrival of the vaccine. While waiting for the arrival of the vaccine, we should continue with the preventive measures. It will take time to vaccinate the entire population. It should be obligatory to follow the restrictive measures, and we should continue to test the people and always test the people to be able to put this epidemic under control while waiting for the vaccine. So thank you very much, Madam Chair, for having given me the floor. Thank you very much, Professor Papa Salif. So, as a matter of fact, I would like to come back to some of the points which you have raised to say simply that preparation, as a matter of fact, should start now. On the one hand, the vaccines are being prepared to be sent, and the worst that may happen is if these vaccines arrive in different airports and preparation has not been made to transfer them to the population. And as a matter of fact, the key word right now is preparation to ensure that the national plans could be conceived. There should be coordination amongst all the international partners, UNICEF, WHO, the World Bank, to ensure that the preparation plans are uniformized to facilitate this preparation, because it is important. We have been told that there could be specificities for some of the vaccines. So, as a matter of fact, we should start dealing with all these issues and obtain the necessary solutions so that each of our citizens will have access to the vaccines in the best possible time. I would like to thank you, Professor Salif So, for this excellent presentation. And now I would like to call on Professor Richard Hatchett, who is the Director General of the Coalition for Innovations in the Preparation against to fight epidemics. Professor Richard, the question I'd like to ask you is, what is a place for Africa, even if it is one of the continents which is least affected today in the development of the vaccine against COVID-19. What are the opportunities? What are the challenges? Richard, you have 5 minutes.
Their Excellence, Mesdames et Messieurs, bonjour. Et
Your Excellency, ladies and
gentlemen, invité à vous parler.
Good morning, and thank you for inviting me.
C'est un plaisir de participer.
It is
Je ne
indeed a
parle
pleasure.
pas très bien français et je vais parler en anglais. All of us obviously will remember 2020 like no other year. This has been just an incredible year of challenges, profound global suffering impacting our lives, societies, economies everywhere, including in Africa, of course. Nonetheless, we have also seen tremendous global collaboration, global scientific solidarity, such as Professor Su mentioned, and we have moved forward together through mechanisms like COVAX. I want to, in speaking to the Madam Chair's question, I want to first highlight and commend the African continent's incredible achievement in responding so quickly and effectively and in a coordinated fashion to the pandemic. In many ways, Africa has responded more effectively than many other parts of the world, and certainly with more solidarity. From Lesotho, who acted before a single case was reported in the country, to Rwanda, leading the way in contact tracing, and Nigeria's rapid work to sequence virus genomes as they emerged in Nigeria. The diligent actions of health services, researchers, and communities have meant that cases of COVID-19 have been comparatively lower in Africa than in other parts of the world, significantly lower. This has been achieved while some countries have been fighting other epidemic threats at the same time. Focusing on vaccines, we have also seen swift action in Africa and around the world to ensure that we will have these critical tools as soon as possible. My organization, CEPI, was set up in response to the West African Ebola epidemic to better prepare the world for future disease threats. And we responded very, very rapidly to the emergence of COVID-19. We established our first 3 partnerships to develop vaccines against COVID-19 when there were only 561 cases reported in the world. And we have since established one of the world's largest portfolios of vaccines. We've invested in 10 vaccines at this point. And we have built our portfolio on the principles of speed, scale, and access. We are absolutely committed to delivering vaccines as quickly as possible at a scale of hundreds of millions or billions of doses in support of COVAX, and to ensure global access. As Professor Su mentioned, there are a tremendous number of efforts globally to develop vaccines, with some 50 vaccines now in clinical trials and 12 having reached phase 3. 2 of those vaccine development efforts originated here in Africa. One at the National Research Center in Egypt, and the other at Adeleke University in Nigeria. These candidates are still in preclinical development, but we are monitoring their progress as we are monitoring the progress of all vaccines globally. Clinical trials involving thousands of volunteers have also been run or are being run in Africa to provide the critical data to assess the safety and efficacy of these vaccines. These include trials in South Africa, Kenya, Morocco, and Egypt to assess some of the leading COVID-19 vaccines globally, the vaccines being developed by Oxford and AstraZeneca, by Janssen, by Pfizer, Novavax, and Sinopharm. Findings from these trials and other trials around the world have, of course, allowed these vaccines to progress very rapidly. The Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine has received emergency approval in the UK, is likely to receive approval in the United States in coming days, and other vaccines will soon follow. And we are working closely with Gavi and with WHO to ensure that these vaccines are brought through the pre-qualification process or the emergency use listing process at WHO so that they can be made available globally. We are also working with African regulators, particularly through the continent-wide African Vaccine Regulatory Forum, or AVAREF, which has presented a very effective model for the world on regional harmonization of review and making vaccines available in an accelerated fashion. Of course, what is important is for all to benefit. A global pandemic absolutely requires a global solution, and cooperation is essential globally, both to end the pandemic and to ensure that all people globally can have access to those vaccines, including the peoples of Africa. In partnership with Gavi and WHO, we have already spoken about COVAX. CEPI has worked to create COVAX with the goal of enabling fair allocation of COVID-19 vaccines, with the goal of ending the acute phase of the pandemic by the end of 2021. COVAX is the only solution which aims to turn the tide on vaccine nationalism globally and to protect those who are threatened, which is everyone, regardless of income. So far, 189 countries and economies, including all across Africa, have now indicated that they wish to participate in COVAX and to have access to the COVAX vaccine portfolio, which will include the vaccines that CEPI has supported, as well as other vaccines from around the world that are demonstrated to be safe and effective. From an R&D perspective, it is important to realize that we must continue to develop new vaccines that will serve the needs of all segments of all populations in all countries, and that it is important to build research capacity in Africa to support basic research and development, basic discovery as exemplified by the two vaccines that I mentioned, as well as the clinical development of those vaccines, and ultimately their manufacturing here in the African continent. We are working very closely with our partners, with the Gates Foundation and others, to advance the next generation of vaccines, to make them easier to deliver and to easier to manufacture. Just in conclusion, I would say that the vaccines that have demonstrated their success already, the mRNA vaccines, represent a transformative change in the development of vaccines. They move from biology to chemistry, and the potential to produce vaccines in a more reliable and rapid fashion through chemical synthesis rather than through biological processes also presents a great opportunity for the world, for Africa and other regions around the world, to leapfrog over the challenges with establishing manufacturing capacities that we have seen previously, and potentially to undertake vaccine development for the region at scale in the future. Finally, I want to say Africa has led an extremely effective continent-wide response. I want to commend the incredible work of Africa CDC, AVAREF, AFRO, National Centers for Disease Control, National Response Mechanisms, and others who have been so critical to our continuing efforts to control COVID-19. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Richard HATCHETT, for your presentation and these very important points. And I would like to recall that the institutions which are developed to support Africa in its response to some of the epidemics which have taken place in the past Uh, it is thanks to this experience that it's thanks to this experience that we have been able to develop our response to the COVID-19 pandemic. And once more, I would also like to thank you for mentioning all the different partnerships with the different organizations, African organizations, because it is indeed a work of partnership. We have to work together to attain our goal, and that is the key word. So now let's fold our sleeves, if I may say that. We should do that, all of us, because there's that fantastic opportunity and we can succeed. We can succeed. All we need to do is work together. So once again, I would like to thank the two members of the panel for their presentations, which is indeed very relevant, especially the fact that they have talked about these action plans, which are realistic and possible to achieve immediately. Now, let me give the button of command to the other chair of this session for him to introduce the panelists for the next session. Chair, I hand over to you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. SARAKA-YAO. It is with great honor that I'll now chair the second part. We'll dive in straight. It is the logical step following what we've just heard, and I would like to take this opportunity to also greet Salif that I didn't see at the beginning, and I would just also like to greet our master, the Professor Oumar, our mentor, as well as all the panel members. I do not know all of you. However, I would like to greet you all. On behalf of the Ministry of Higher Education, Research and Innovation of Senegal, I would like to thank the State Minister for her invitation. I'm just back from the closing ceremony of the African and Malagasy Council for Higher Education. I changed the program so that they would move up the closing ceremony so I could be here. This is just to show you how important this event is for our minister and our ministry. And our minister would like to greet you all. He's also preparing another um, meeting on the interstate veterinarian school. We are following the One Health concept, and I find it very remarkable the discussion that we have on human health. And Monday we'll start a meeting on animal health, and I think that this shows the approach that we should take. Some days ago, the president, Mr. Macky Sall, just gave the award, the Macky Sall Award for Research and Innovation, and he just doubled the Macky Sall Fund on Research and Innovation that went from 500 million to 1 billion CFA francs. And this really shows you that on an institutional level, on a political level, the president that is a scientist, and also the minister of higher education that is also a scientist by profession, the importance that they give to everything that you've been doing. Myself, I am a produce of medicine and research, and the Professor Awamari Sek herself had already built the road for us, Professor Salif, myself, and our young colleagues, the Professor Ndiaye and the Professor Sek. So I'm not in a virtual environment. This is my element. I would like to also commend the presence of the Minister Bruno Itwa. Despite his workload, he took the time to be here with us. This is on behalf of my minister. I would just like maybe to ask the technical team to show my slides. I know that I only have 5 minutes to be fair, and I'll try to be short. So I just want to insist on the fact that the fund for research are quite weak, and everyone knows that, and this is why that the example that the President Macky Sall has given by inviting his African peers and international organization to fund research is so important. A country cannot become developed without research, without boosting innovation. If we had the means, I can assure you that the vaccine would be produced in Africa. You have to remember the yellow fever vaccine history, or the hepatitis vaccine, where the CAR team have made remarkable work. We cannot only we cannot not highlight the resilience of Africa. I went in the suburbs and I've seen young people that were able to build robots speaking local languages to distribute soap and hand washing gel. And I can assure you that by putting a means for research in the hands of Africans, you can just shake things. Just to say the same on the means, the physical means and material means of research. Many of our researchers are in the diaspora. Why? Because in their own country, they do not have the infrastructure, the equipment, the logistics to really apply what they've learned in the African universities first, and then in the most renowned universities of the world. This diaspora needs to be mobilized. Africa only participates to the rate of 2% to the result of research. And if you get rid of Northern Africa and Southern Africa, then it's 0.4%. And this is something we need to change. To just give you on the national level, to just give you an idea of the different funding sources for research. At the national level, we created the Impulsion Fund for Scientific and Technical Research. It's a magnificent project from dating back to 2002. We need to reassess it, revise it to better meet the objective. Another project that is towards women in academia. And this is really something that we commend, because first of all, we are all for gender equality, and I myself believe that more women, doctors, researchers, CEOs, ministers, I think that this will have an impact on the international level. Not just saying that to say it, no. It is just not it's not an empty compliment. I really believe that every time we gave women responsibilities, women being more practical than men, they just do what needs to be done, even though it's with a lot of charisma. Women, for example, do not embezzle money usually, and so they are really powerfully honest in a way, and I think that it is something we really need. I'm not, once again, just giving you empty compliments and just trying to throw flowers at you. No, this is a project of the higher education ministry, and it's a very relevant project that we'll try to implement. On the still on the national level, we have a certain number of mechanisms that we need to keep in mind within our university and in the academia. Researchers have study trips with premiums. We have taken initiatives, and the president has created a certain number of awards at the national level, but also within the African and Malagasy Council for Higher Education. we've just received $1 billion for the 19 countries of the CAMES area. So we are not just selfish and only think about the national level. No, we have a Pan-African vision. On the sub-regional level, it is the CAMES that structure us. But the last few years, we've seen certain regional organizations such as the WAMU, the West Africa Monetary and Economic Area. We've also have the ECOWAS that it takes an interest in health and research and universities. Within the African Union, we've just created the African spatial agencies, and with the CDC, we've put into place other mechanisms. So you have to understand that things are moving. We know that we can improve, and with the help of God, we will. On the sub-regional level, still there are many mechanisms. I'll leave my slides with you so that I can be brief, but you can see that there are many initiatives that are being set up. At the international level, there are many initiatives as well that are being taken through organizations such as the WHO, the USAID, the Japanese Cooperation, the European Union, the Atomic Energy Agency as well, and another number of international organizations that takes a greater interest in research and innovation. We also have multinationals such as companies in the digital or the banking system, or other foundations such as the Bill and Melinda Gates, the Ellen Keller International Foundation, that takes a greater interest in not only health but in research, which is our subject here. What are the perspective? We've talked about it the past few years with the World Bank. That is currently supporting the Excellence Center. I think that the Professor Daouda will be able to say a few words on this. And we've realized the extraordinary potential of African human resources. I've been working for 3 months in the Directorate of Higher Education and Research, and the best word that can describe this is that I'm absolutely amazed by the number of researchers, the quality of their research, their background. They work in very difficult conditions, and we need to fight to find new initiatives. We are thinking about it, and tomorrow, for example, I am organizing a workshop on the new innovative financing mechanism for research. And we will meet with the minister and the president to have a fund, the fund to support innovation and research, the fund for advancement of innovation and research. And I would also like we would like to open it to innovative sources, and not think that government and state resources will always be able to settle this issue of funding. There are too many priorities in Africa, and so we need ourselves to find the mechanism. And this is why I would like to commend the organization of this forum, and I would like to thank you. This is what I had to say, trying to be brief and respect the time that was allocated to me, and allow time for the next speakers. Now, I would like, in the same vein, to ask the Professor Daouda, That was the order that was given to me, but if the Minister Itwa would like to change the order, we can do it. Huh? Daouda and Jai will accept. So I'll let you decide, what do you prefer? Because I would like, from your experience, Daouda is a researcher, an emeritus researcher, well renowned, and Mr. Itwa is a mathematician that has now entered the governmental sphere to really shake things up. And so as a co-chair, I would like to know, from your professional experience, that you would share with us concrete and practical solutions. Thank you. I'll let you decide among yourself. We'll try. Thank you very much. We can follow the order that was given. Professor Daouda and I can take the floor, and then I'll finish. Thank you very much, Mr. The Minister. Daouda, my dear brother, you now have the floor. Thank you very much. Thank you for the Minister for allowing me to start. And again, thank you to our mentor, the Professor Awa Maricol Sek, for this initiative that is important for the country, but also for the world. Thank you to all my mentors that are present and all my colleagues. Could my slides be shared? I'll try to be brief. Of course, yes, so I'll try to summarize my slides, really, as the Professor Diallo has said. We'll give you the slides later. I'll just want to, I think that the Professor Diallo has really set the tone of our debate, the problem of emerging countries, developing countries compared to developed countries. Just to say that now we cannot find anything without fund. And the question is a recurring one: why in developing countries people do not find anything? Well, the answer is that most of the time there are not enough structures, scientists that have the ability to get funding. And many of these scientists that have found things receive funding from abroad. And this is why today funding is reliant on a north-south and a south-south partnership. This is a very important slide for me. Why? Because first of all, we need to know where we need funding for research. If we take the case of COVID-19, COVID-19 has shaken the whole world. It is quite rare that we have a situation where the whole world is affected by a pandemic. And today we'll see it in other slides that research needs to be carried out everywhere where there is a pandemic. And we can see today the differences when it comes to the research because of the available fund, and most of the time it is a problem with the policies, the governmental policies. And here, for example, this is quite old, I think, but it's the same reality still that we're facing. What does it mean? Well, we see that those that are carrying research in our developing countries compared to Europe, the United States, Canada, or Asia, in Africa, we rely on universities, for example. And if we look at the funding for university here, we can see quite clearly that the funds are quite low, and universities are the institutions that are the less given funds. The government or the public, and this is especially for the American continent and Europe. It's not the case in Africa. This shows that at the global level, we have the impression that it's the government or the public that funds research, but in Africa, it's not the case. And this is why in Western countries, we have great results in United States or Europe, where the government put money on the table, hundreds of thousands of millions of dollars. that helps them find $100 million that help them. We have the same protocols of the CDC. We even have an African CDC, and we have the same patients, the same populations. What is the difference here is the resources. We can even see here that even the private sector plays a very important role in funding, as the Professor Salif said, with the development of vaccine. And I think that we need fundamental research that will help policy making. If we look at this table where you can see the main donors, the United States, of course, followed, and Canada, followed by Europe, Asia, we do not really see the place of Africa here. If we speak in million, hundred of millions of dollars, of euros, of course we cannot have Africa here, and this is why we need to really commend the President Macky Sall that has increased the fund allocated to research in CAMES, because as long as we will wait for funds from abroad, it will be difficult for African to keep with their research. This is an example. This is quite recent. What are the top 10 world funders for biomedical research in the world? So that support research centers in epidemiology, in vaccine research, in diagnostic studies, in drugs and clinical trials, etc. We know about it ourselves because we share the same discussion and research platform in with partnership, through partnership. And we can see that the National Institute of Health is the first institution with more than 2,000 billions of dollars. And then you have the European Commission and other institutions. This is just to say, once again, that here we do not really see the developing countries investing, even though they do not have the means or the resources. We can see that the biggest funders are the US and Europe. Even in Asia, it is done, but the top two are that support research on the international level is the United States and Europe. This slide actually confirms it. This is the map, and you can see it with COVID-19 as well. Those are the countries where you can see research. You can see the United States, you can see Europe, you can see Australia. Africa, even if it's a continent where we face a lot of epidemics, we do not really see this place of research. And the Professor Gallo has said it. When it comes to vaccine research, we can see that here once again in when we talk about countries and especially in institution, you can see the Wellcome Trust, the MRC, the European Commission that invested quite a lot in the research vaccine, but you also have the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and other charities, and some charities that have helped a lot in the development of vaccine with the million of euros that have been spent. And these are recent numbers, just to say that in reality, once again, you'll see the World Bank, as we'll see, but it is quite rare to see developing countries, institutions being involved in such a matter. Research in Africa now. We can see that most of the funds that are allocated to research in Africa still come from grants from the NIH, NIAID, from Wellcome Trust, from MRC, the Gates Foundation, the WHO, the World Bank with excellent centers. And we can see most of the time that those are Eastern and Southern African countries that are more involved. You have for Western Africa, Northern Africa, there's not a lot. And this is explained this explains why we have certain issues facing certain pathology and epidemics in Africa. This is a reality. These are the diseases around the world. We can see the number of countries in Africa is not the same as in Latin America, Australia, Europe, and even the United States. If we look at malaria, recently the share to research for the vaccine for vaccine development is relatively high, around $700 million, but most of the funding are given to decision makers, main decision makers, and they are invested in developed countries and not really in Africa to be able to really understand what it when it comes to the malaria case. This is the same slides to really show you that once again it's the government or the public that invest. If you look at it closely, you can see that it is once again the US and the European continent that we are talking about here. Once again, same slides, Eastern Africa. We see that Eastern Africa is more supported when it comes to research and health. Tanzania is the one that gets the most funding with more than $100 million allocated to this country, followed by Uganda, Kenya, and you don't see a lot of Central and Western African countries. An example of the Ebola epidemic, and this comes back to donors again. So we see that during the past epidemics, even if during the outbreaks, the implementation is the same, once again, the same uh, donors, the NIH, the Wellcome Trust with millions of dollars. And this is why vaccine research and new drugs research poses a lot of problems in the countries that are usually the most affected, meaning Africa. We can see here how rapid the development of the vaccine was for COVID-19. And I told them, why didn't we have this development for malaria, for example, since 95% of the cases are in Africa? And where are our decision makers to settle this issue? When it touches the Western countries, then they mobilize themselves. When it's Africa, we have other issues. When it comes to COVID-19, we can see that in dark blue, the darker the color, the more research. You can see the difference. We have the impression that in Africa there is no research, even though there is. It's quite weak. Where you have the means is where you have the research. We can see the United States, we can see Europe, we can see Asia, we can see Oceania. But however, Africa is quite absent. If it's not the case in research, as it has been said by Gallo, we can do everything in Africa. We could have discovered a vaccine in Africa. We can discover new drugs in Africa, but we do not have enough resources to do so. This is the same again. I'm trying to go quickly. This is just to say, once again, as I said earlier, the United States, once again, Canada, Europe are the main donors when it comes to research. And that is also the case of COVID-19. And you can see what is happening. And unfortunately, what will be the problem? The problem with the vaccine, I know that Professor Salia said, the communication around the vaccine, I think that we need to anticipate on many things. The problem that we're facing at the moment, if this work were carried out in Africa or that African institutions were involved from the beginning, it would have been easier because if it locally produced, people trust it more than when it's imported. It's not just for research, but also for food stuff. If it's imported, they all tell you, oh, be careful. But if it's local, okay, you can go ahead. So we need to look at this, assess the situation for other pandemics and outbreaks. We need to reassess our situations to understand that if we want to help the world in countries such as Africa, if we do not have the resources, we'll not be able to eradicate countries because the countries where people will accept vaccine will not be the countries where there weren't any capacity building or any support. When it comes to perspective now, One Health initiative, I think that we really need to take this One Health initiative for research. because if not, what will happen? Every time we'll have important research by renowned scientific, population will not accept it because they weren't involved from the get-go. We know that from in our research activities, if we want to do something, we need to involve the communities from the very beginning and share with them the results. If we just give them results from other countries, as we are doing at the moment, if we anticipate and involve all the concerned countries, that the funding is spread across all level, I think that it will be better for the whole world. I think a very good article that I recommend. And in conclusion, I want to say that we need to improve the research capacity and funding capacities as well. Even outside of outbreaks and pandemics, we need to make sure that we have some capacity building, that we strengthen the structures, how the World Bank is doing with the Center of Excellence, the CDC Africa, CDC Atlanta, international organization help build capacities of our organization and our structures so that the result from our work will not be ethically problematic and will help us find solution for pandemic. Thank you very much for your attention. I hope that I was brief enough. It's difficult to say everything I have to say, but I've tried to share as much as possible, and the slides will be given to you. Thank you very much, Professor Daouda. This was very instructive. I've learned quite a lot, and I hope that in our work around that, I see that you're involved. You've heard a certain number of contribution. You have
You
a
are in
strategic.
a strategic position, a decision-making position in the government, and it is really a summary of all what we are experiencing. So I think in this panel, we have seen your vision from all what we've heard this morning. So as a scientific personality who is in a position, a central position, a pivot position in regard to the political approach and in relation with your colleagues, higher education, research, what is your point of view? And we are all listening to you very attentively. You have the floor to indeed tell us how we could really make things move by making good decisions. Thank you. You have the floor. Thank you very much, Professor Diallo. Thank you, especially this beautiful country, Senegal, which continues to bring up new initiatives for us, intellectual initiatives, and President Macky Sall. In fact, we have a common past. We have in common petrol in our education, in our professional career. I would also like to thank Professor Awa Marigosek, who still has that initiative of what is done in the scientific sphere in Africa. I would also like to thank Madame and others who had the opportunity to control one of the panels. Let me also thank the other members of the panel. We've listened with a lot of attention, with a lot of interest, all what has taken place here today. And I think it was a very, very rich panel. And thank you very much for your contribution, Professor Salisu, Professor Cheikh and you too. So I'd like to also thank Professor Ndiaye. So I have the heavy responsibility, the huge responsibility of playing several roles at the same time. At some points, I was a Minister of Innovation and for several years, and today I want to say 4 or 5 things. The first, as a matter of fact, there can be no development without research. And when we talk of development, it's not just economic development. Today, everything which is secret, doctrinal, contributes to development. And they could contribute directly or indirectly, and they all contribute in building man as a person. So there's immense social development in terms of health, but also there's economic and financial development, because all of that affirmation must be part of a vision and a shared vision. A shared vision at the level of our nations, a shared vision at the level of our regions, and a shared vision at the level of the continent. It shouldn't just be a slogan. It has to be an integrated, assimilated part of thinking, and the means to implement should be put at our disposal. It should become a determinant factor in all what we are doing. So research should be given its rightful place in our society. That's what some countries have done. And to think that it's only the rich countries that are supposed to do this will be a terrible mistake. By way of illustration, we could talk about emerging countries. Some time ago, they were poorer than African countries. 40 years ago, they decided that science and innovation would be the key. And they focused on that, and we can see the results. At the time, they were merely surviving. They were not developed. They were just surviving. Let's take the example of Singapore. They did not even have the slightest development. They were just surviving. They didn't even know how to get drinking water. But they decided from there on that science and innovation would help them. And of course, through appropriate human resources. All of this put together was indeed the source of success in Europe and other parts of the world. So, even though we talk about the United States as a rich country and Europe as a rich continent, thank you for the slides. Canada, Australia, well, they were indeed aware of what they were supposed to do. So there's no time to wait. We just need to be aware, and that will be a determinant factor for us to move towards prosperity. Secondly, I think it is inconceivable to separate research and innovation. Each time we talk about research, we should talk about innovation. Innovation is a genetic link to research. As a matter of fact, we may innovate without research at times, but research should have, as a result, innovation, especially for our countries which are developing. In other words, research must be given a very important place in the service of development. And this goes through innovation. There will be several researches carried out. The fundamental research, Africa has to be involved. Africa has a responsibility to conduct research, because when we look at its biodiversity, by its very nature, we have a hydroelectric potential. And all of these are responsibilities which Africa can assume through research. And this is fundamental research. Africa must continue with this fundamental research, both at the level of trying to find a rightful place in the global sphere, in all the work, for instance, done by Cheikh and DIOP and others. This must continue. So we should occupy the rightful place of Africa. And we have played a role in the history of humanity. And with regard to fundamental research, Africa must continue to struggle and must play also an important role in other areas of research. So that is what will lead to innovation naturally. So research which is not productive, which is not ending in brevis, will not be productive research. So we should not be contented with having the minority share in the field of research. We can have the majority share. So research and innovation should be the key. Now, we should make a distinction between fundamental research and other forms of research. We can see that they cannot be funded in the same way. Fundamental research is different and it's funded by governments, and a lot of has been said about it, so I don't really have to come back to that at the sub-regional level, at the national level, at the international level. So we have to develop that. I'm from Congo, and I'm in the center of the greatest basin, the second biggest basin in the world, the Congo Basin. And even in Gabon, it is extraordinary. So we cannot ask African countries to carry out research to preserve this basin. There's need for international solidarity to help Africa, which has that responsibility. So fundamental research is important. The other forms of research are also important and can be funded by all the countries which are stakeholders in the national and sub-regional lives in Africa, and all the other communities, economic, social communities, amongst the scientific communities. They should be able to contribute in this area where there's no development. And without research and innovation, this cannot be done. If this paradigm is taken into consideration, it will participate, can contribute to research. In a government, funding is necessary, and the government has to determine the economic and financial choices. Now, if they are not convinced of the importance of research for research, how can they contribute? So they'll not be able to give the necessary resources to develop research. So if they are not convinced as the government officials, it will be very difficult. If the head of state himself is not convinced, how can we amass the resources for research? So it is absolutely necessary for scientists that we are, that you are, it is absolutely necessary for us to make it an obligation to convince all the others. Let's include this paradigm that there's need for development. If this is true, then the private sector will come to help, the industry will come to help, the businessmen will come to help, and the agricultural sector will come to help. Let's take the example of Côte d'Ivoire, whose research is funded through government contribution, but also by beneficiaries. Every day, they live this experience and they benefit from research in their respective areas, and there is a fund in their country which is contributed by beneficiaries, the natives, and it is in the benefit of research. And that is the way forward. Let's apply to all the different areas of our society, and they will be funded. And I also believe that if research is innovation-based or innovation-oriented, it will lead to production. We could have the brevets, and this could be achieved easily by itself through the valorization of our resources. Today, we are still far from the objectives which we could indeed attain. There is a relationship which all economists know. Mathematicians say there's a function between resources for production of brevets and innovation and the growth rate. The United States, for instance, is a perfect illustration, a perfect case in point. It spends the highest amount of money on research, and this is translated by a growth rate which we all know, and so on and so forth. So if research is conducted and if it yields the brevets, well, it could be able to fund itself thanks to what could be gained from these research activities. So this, of course, is applicable to health, and we're talking about health here. And this could be through laboratories. There's some who fund. They spend more on funding in such situations. Research funding in health sector in the United States is also funded by the public and the private sectors. And this is almost permanent. Of course, the government spends more, but why? Because they know that there is indeed a dividend which they will gain through this investment. Of course, that's why they invest in this area. So I believe that I'll stop at this juncture. We need to follow the example of President Macky Sall. We need to encourage him to continue along those lines with his advocacy. And I believe that it is all the stakeholders of our communities, our national, sub-regional, and continental stakeholders who should be put at the helm of all our development projects in research and innovation, and they should be given the necessary funding. So I'll stop at this point and give way for others to take the floor. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Minister. It is indeed very powerful, a very powerful presentation. And Madam Minister, I know that in your life, you have never been a spectator. You have always been an unfiltered actress. So now you have listened to your colleague, Minister, who perhaps you can give a feedback of all what you've heard here today. So there's Professor Cheikh. We cannot hear the speaker. There's slight interruptions. There's
and be sure that you get the meds and feed us back in any other aspect you would like to come back. You can do it in English because all the panelists are very fluent in English also. But I would like to ask, je vais juste demander au professeur Marie-Cole Cheikh.
I'll just like the Professor Cheikh to give their opinion before the other members of the panel take the floor. We have about 10 minutes before the end of this panel. Madam Professor, you have the floor. Madam Minister, if you have anything to add?
Monsieur le Président.
Oui, Ibrahim, oui.
Yes, Ibrahima. With your permission, after this brilliant presentation by this brilliant expert, would like to give an opportunity to the public to participate. I've identified 3 questions from the public, and I would like to share, particularly with Professor Salif. So, the first is from Madame Brandin Bila. Her question is as follows. To her African countries, there are many leaders in African countries who face many other problems such as malaria and are hesitant. So under such conditions, how can we find arguments to increase the participation of the population in the implementation of the COVAX vaccine in Africa? There is a second question which was asked by Amadou Gallo to him. It talks about the strategy for vaccination. Could it begin with the vaccination of the masses? Because to have this global immunity, it is necessary to have at least 80% of the population vaccinated. So, should they begin with this vaccination of the masses or targeted persons who face high risk of COVID infection? The question was asked by Madame Alice Declos. Now, there are interferences. We cannot hear the speaker well, unfortunately, for this third question. She talked about the COVAX convention, where there will be about 10 to 15 vaccines under study. Now, she would like to know what is the criteria of choice of vaccine. When were they established? What's the modality? What are the modalities? And when and how are these vaccines chosen? These are the 3 questions which I've been able to gather from the audience. Thank you very much, Professor Cheikh. I'd like to thank those who asked questions, and I'd like to focus on the 2 questions. And I think Professor HATCHETT will also come to contribute to the responses. Now, with regard to the communication strategy, I believe that those who asked this question are right. We have to begin with a communication strategy right from now. There is a need for us to be able to vaccinate groups, and everyone should be involved. But I think this communication should start with the education of the population. There's denial of vaccines and the fact that people are trying to be prudent, but we need to provide scientific arguments. We have to use traditional leaders, religious leaders, opinion leaders, and we should be able to make them see the importance of these vaccines by using decentralized, simple language. The vaccine will come. We may not have the time to do all of this. So it should be targeted communication, communication of the masses, and we should involve all opinion leaders, especially based on science. And I believe that that way we'll be able to ask all the questions asked by the population, and all these questions are legitimate. Now, vaccination of the masses, we cannot do that now because the production units are available. And now it is very interesting from the scientific perspective what we are experiencing now. Science is good when it is properly done, and what has been proposed is in different phases of vaccination. First, we vaccinate the risk groups to reduce health growth, the health group, the health officials, and those who have weaknesses, health weaknesses. The second phase will be to vaccinate the aged persons, and then we move to general vaccination or herd vaccination. We cannot go to all the countries in the world and do that now. There are the risk group, and from the logistics, we should know how many vaccines are needed, and there will be the need for international solidarity, and then we can see how they could be distributed amongst the different countries and different continents. So today, one country alone cannot do all of that. There's a need for international solidarity. Now, just to follow up on what Professor Cheikh said, that is a question from Professor Alisteko, which I believe is also very important. And of course, the professor will complete the criteria for choice. It is true that COVAX is going to extend its vaccines to other countries, but it is important from the point of view of criteria of choice, based on logistics, to take into consideration the realities of our country, and whether we have refrigerators in all the different parts at 80 degrees, less than 80 degrees centigrade minus, and African countries should be able to make suggestions and propose solutions to the distribution and availability of these vaccines in our countries. I believe that there's a multi-pronged approach, an African approach, just as there could be a sub-regional approach to discuss with COVAX what could be the different types of vaccines which will be most adapted. But I have no shadow of doubt that our African countries are already used to vaccinating people. And with this expertise, we could adapt to the new vaccine and vaccinate as many people as possible in our respective countries. Thank you, Professor Cheikh. Thank you very much. We really don't have much time left, just a few minutes, but we'll give the floor to Professor Richard to provide his own answers in regard to the criteria for choice of vaccines.
Sure, thank you. And Professor Sao answered the question about the mass vaccination very well. In terms of the criteria of choice, there is, of course, the reality that vaccines will become available at different times and in different volumes. UNICEF has issued a call for proposals, and all vaccine manufacturers who are interested in working with COVAX will be submitting proposals to UNICEF, and those will be evaluated with Gavi. All vaccines considered for COVAX will be evaluated by an independent product group, which is thinking about the composition of the COVAX portfolio as a whole and seeking to have a variety of vaccines that can be used in a variety of contexts. And Professor Sao spoke to the importance of local decision-making in determining which vaccines can be used. Obviously, the vaccines will need to meet national regulatory requirements, and WHO will assist that process by evaluating for pre-qualification or emergency use listing. But there will be a variety of vaccines with a variety of different attributes and storage requirements, and that will be able to be used in different ways. And COVAX will work with local national partners to make sure that the countries are comfortable with the vaccines that are offered to them. But those vaccines, over time, there will be more and more diversity of vaccines available. Initially, obviously, the choice may be quite limited.
Professeur Cheikh, juste au niveau du chat, il y a une question extrêmement importante qu'il faut.
Professor Cheikh, on the chat, there's a very important question which we should clarify now. Someone asked how much it would cost. These vaccines, will they be free? They'll be free for the entire population. They'll be free even in the developed world, and especially in our countries. I think this is what we should insist on. That's what I refer to as geographical accessibility and financial accessibility. It is indeed a common good. I think we need to repeat this. It's a global effort, but it is also an individual effort, a district effort, a regional effort, a national effort, and just to ensure that 80 to 90% or so of the population will be vaccinated. So we have practically come to the end. I would like to reassure the members of the panel that each of them could say their last word as far as the topic is concerned. Now, Prof, since you have the floor, what is your last word? Thank you very much. My last word is science is good when it is properly done. And we have learned about this with COVID. So we have had the opportunity to have access to the data of these trials. And indeed, they are indeed properly done. So let's prepare the minds of the population to receive the vaccines, and there should be appropriate communication at the level of the communities. Noted, noted. Sek, your last word. Professor Ibrahim Sek, your last word. Well, thank you very much. Congratulations, and I wish you proper continuation the way forward. I'm very proud of you. Mr. Minister of Higher Education, or rather in Congo, thank you very much. It is my hope that Africa will come out of this huge challenge successfully, and it is my hope that the vaccine will indeed make Africa even more resilient, which we have proven. Thank you very much. Professor Daouda NDIAYE, thank you very much. My last word is there should be sufficient funding from local leaders, that's the government, but also there should be funding from the international level, especially the major financial institutions in the world. Thank you. Professor HATCHETT, last word, your last word.
Yes, I just want to congratulate Africa on presenting a wonderful example to the world of continental solidarity and joint effort. We have a very long way to go in the struggle against COVID, but after COVID, we will also need to think about the risk of pandemics in the future, and we at CEPI look forward to working with African partners to make the world a safer place.
Merci beaucoup.
Madame Sekela?
Thank you very much. With that, we come to the end of this session, which focus on the solution of vaccines and research funding. We thank you all and hope to see you next time. Bye.
Bye-bye.